honestly, we know what a directory structure is, right? If we go here and then we type in, C:\\, that's the root of this directory, of this drive. And we could go in and find another one and find another one, right? And we're going down into subdirectory, subdirectory, subdirectory. And eventually we might find a file. And a file typically has a file name followed by an extension, although it doesn't have to. But if there is no extension on it, if you double click on it, then the operating system's not going to know what to do with it, at least on Windows. Not strictly true of other. That's because Windows does not maintain what is known as metadata, or if they do, I'm not aware of it. And what metadata is it's another file that indicates information about the file, right? So with metadata, if there was metadata associated with it, then even if it was missing the .py extension, it'd be able to open. On the other hand, I think that operating systems have gone away from using metadata, because if you copied it like from a Mac onto a PC and it lost its metadata, then when you brought it back, right, it'd be missing information about it. So I don't think operating systems tend to do that anymore. I'm not sure about Linux, but I'm real sure that the Mac does not maintain metadata. And since it's based on a variation of Unix, I would doubt that Linux does, but I could easily be proven wrong. So if we go here and look at this slide, I wish that PowerPoint would close, but it doesn't want to. We can close this one now. So a complete set of directories follows a tree-like structure, with a single root directory at the top and branches down to nested files. Now sometimes you can create a symbolic link so that this subdirectory, you see a subdirectory listed from it, and if you went into it, you're really here, right? You can use symbolic links like if you have multiple drive letters and you want, something to show up as G:, that's actually part of your C drive, right? But you want it to, that specific folder to be accessible from another drive letter. You can do things like that, but that's kind of confusing at a point. You could set it up so it was circular, right? You went into that one, and then you're really that one, and you went into that one, you went into that one. You could just keep clicking folders forever. So it's called a path name. If the path name goes all the way to the root directory, it's called an absolute path name. If it starts from the current working directory, it's called a relative path name. Like, what does that mean? Like this. And again, this is just more operating stuff. Notice that I'm in the JG Thompson directory. Under JG Thompson is a desktop directory. There's a couple of files in there called py. So I could come back out. CD ... takes me back out. And then if I do dir desktop / lecture star.py, it's still going to find those files, even though I was not in the same directory, right? Because I specified the subdirectory. But it can get even a little bit weirder, because what if you are in some subdirectory and you want to look at the directory above it? If you do dir ... it shows you everything in the directory above it. And so I could do dir ... pretend I'm not in the JG Thompson directory, that I'm in another one. I could switch to public to make this actually work. So dir ... which takes me back to the users directory, / JG Thompson / desktop / lecture 0 or O or whatever it was, .py. And it didn't find it because I made some mistake here, but if I do that, it'll show us a directory or not, because I don't have a / there. I typed in the wrong thing. Right, so it's lecture 0. So this is a relative path. And a relative path doesn't have to be that complicated, right? It doesn't have to have ... in it to hop up a level. It could just have a directory name, a subdirectory name, followed by a file. But if it's got the drive letter in it, or at least a / at the very beginning of it, right, like dir / users / JG Thompson / desktop / lecture 0, and I hope I haven't typed this wrong, .py. That is an absolute file name. And I could have put in C colon in front of it, right? Not everything uses drive letters, but Windows operating systems do. So that's an absolute, whereas this was a relative path name. So when you're opening a file, you can specify an absolute file name, an absolute path, right? You could do C colon slash, users slash whatever. That'd be an absolute path. It works just fine. Or if you just want to open it from a certain directory and go, down like that, that's fine. Or if you want to pop up a directory, do ... to pop up a directory, that's fine as well. Well, how do we know what directory we're even in? Well, there are some operating system functions for telling us things. Import OS brings in the operating system library. Keep meaning to use PyCharm for one day just to expose us to a different environment, but I'm gonna stick with the tried and true. Are we on lecture N like I think we are?
It's in.
N. And by the way, I've been adding comments to people's assignments and sometimes providing 9.99 rather than 10 scores just to get them to pay attention. If I'd like for you to add more comments. If there's absolutely no comments at all, that's a real problem. I'd at least like for your name. Now this doesn't count for in-class stuff, right? We're just taking notes. But for your homework, at least put your name. And you may as well put the homework name too. But also a short description of it, right? Like this program calculates the value of pi to a number of decimal places the user specifies. That would be enough. You could get even better though and start documenting some of your variables. Like if you declare, if you have n is equal to 3, well, what is n? I don't know what n is. Maybe I do because I gave you the assignment, but it might be number of years, right? And I is something else. Well, what is I? You could tell me. You could put the documentation there. And if it's well documented, then it's possible I might even give you extra credit for doing a really good job on it. What I should be doing is deducting a lot of points for bad documentation, but I'm not really rolling that way. But if there's no documentation, I consider it a big problem. And I would like I said, name, maybe the homework assignment number, and then a description of what it does. Some people just copy a lot of stuff from the homework assignment itself, right? You can do that, copy, paste, and then, it's well, as long as that stuff makes sense, it's, pretty well documented. So anyways, say we want to find out what our current working directory is. Import OS and then get.c. Well, let's just do this from the shell for the moment. Import OS and then os.get, and I think CWD is all in caps. I could be wrong about that. Let me take a peek. Nope, it's all lowercase. What do you know? That's the directory that I'm currently in. So if I write a file, it might go into that directory. Now that's the directory that the shell starts in. That's not the same directory that my program is going to start in. My program starts in whatever directory. I need to correct this a little bit. If you're using PyCharm, it's possible that you're starting your current working directory is going to not be in the same directory that your program file is located in. I believe that to be the case. So you may just have to pay attention to that. I'm going to even add that as a note. It's just nagging at my memory that, and you don't have to type this unless you're using PyCharm, right? Using PyCharm, if Prof recalls correctly, the current working directory is not the directory that the py file is in. But with idle, or if you run it from the command prompt, it is. Well, let's prove that. I'm going to save this as Lecture N, and I'm going to add the code to print the current working directory. And remember, if you're not using PyCharm, you don't have to type in every single note that I make if you don't think it's applicable to you. But it didn't take you that long to type it. So, all right, so Lecture N. I'm going to get the current working directory, CW. Whoops, I've got to import the OS library. Import space OS. CWD equals os.getCWD. Get CWD, parentheses in parentheses, and let's print it out. Print parentheses, quote, current working directory equals, end quote, comma, CWD, in parentheses. And there it is, right? That's the directory that I store my py files in, so that's correct. And if anybody's running PyCharm in here, or if you're using another development environment, I'd be real curious to see what your current working directory is when you run it. You know what?
Is PyCharm like a different version of idle?
Yeah. It's a little bit more professional looking. And it is on these machines, so I just typed in PyCharm down here in the start bar, and it's eventually going to load. That's not it. Get lost.
Can you go back to idle for a second?
Yeah. If it'll stop asking me questions. All right, there we go. There's idle. Oh, come on. There. So I get to choose which theme I want, the black theme, skip remaining defaults. Eventually it'll come up, right? Where'd PyCharm go? Well, forget demonstrating PyCharm. I don't know why it disappeared on me. So once you get PyCharm up and running, create new project. It's going to be a pure Python file. And see, maybe you want to go over to start using this. And then I need to give it like a new, new project name, and I can do all that stuff. And then I can type my code in and run it from here. And then when you're done, that way your project can contain multiple py files, and they're all stored in one subdirectory. And then when you're ready to create another project, it'll create another subdirectory and store all your files there. Yeah, forget it. Okay, so we have the current working directory, which is, important for us to know. We want to know where to, store our data. What if you needed to set your current working directory? Well, I probably could do that. os.setCWD. Now, I could be totally wrong whether this is going to work. I'm just going to do backslash like that and see if it sets me. Now, like I said, that's not going to work. Backslash. Or I probably could have just used a /. Nope, there is no set CWD. Sorry, thinking of the wrong environment. Never mind, delete that real fast. You didn't see that, nobody saw it. So then we could get a list of file names if we wanted to with a command called listdir. os.listdir, and then you give it a directory path. So let's get a list of files. List files equals os dot, I want to make sure I get it right so I don't bother, listdir, os.listdir, os.listdir, parentheses, CWD, our current working directory. And then let's just print it out. Print parentheses list files in parentheses. And those are all the files that are in that directory. Now they're not arranged in a nice pretty order because that's a list. What other languages would call an array? We've talked about lists a couple of times. Why don't we print those out in a nice format? So we're going to use a for loop. For space value in list files colon print value. And there they are, all nicely arranged like that. So, what does it do with directories? If I go and I make a subdirectory in my programming files directory, right, if I go into CIT1203, okay, there is a subdirectory, right? Or __ pi cache. I'm going to make another one just for fun. Why do I not see a new directory button? Okay, fine. Right click over here. New folder. Okay. I'm just going to call this temp. So if I run my program again, I'm going to see that as being listed as one of the things. Now, I was vague. I said one of the things. That's not a file, right? We got a list of files, but we also got a list of directories at the same time. You can test to see if something is a directory or not, or if it's a file or not. You can also check just to see whether something exists. What if the user wants to open a file? So you ask them for the file name, but it doesn't exist. We could check. We could tell them it doesn't exist without even trying to open it. There it is. chdir. That's what I was looking for. How to change a directory. Exists. And then you can test it. Isdir. Then you can check whether it's a file. You could get the size of that file. Let's play with some of those things. Let's ask the user for a file name. File name, or we were using FN before, so why not? File name equals input parentheses quote. What file should we open? Question mark, space, space, close angle brace, end quote, in parentheses. Now we're going to check to see if that file exists. If os dot, I want to get it exactly right so I don't fumble, exists, os dot exists, parentheses fn, in parentheses colon, it's a good file. We could do something with it. Print file exists. Else, guess what? It doesn't exist. Print file does not exist. Should we create it? Now we're not going to actually implement that code, right? But it's the kind of stuff you could do. They specify a file. It's not there. Now what if you're trying to save to a file, right? You create a whole bunch of data. You let them specify a file name. When that file gets opened for writing with that quote W, it's going to get blown away. Anything that was in it previously is going to get blown away. You might want to check to make sure that that file does not exist, and if it does, then ask them if they're sure they want to erase it. So something like this. Let's get another file name. fn equals input, parentheses, quote, save to what file? Question mark, space, space, greater than, end quote, in parentheses. Now we're going to check it again. If os.exists, parentheses, fn, in parentheses, colon, print file already exists. Do you wish to override it? Space, space, greater than, end quote, end parentheses, right? Then we could have some code that handles that, right? Else, it's safe to save to it. Print. Okay, saving to file. Now hopefully you understand, I'm not actually putting the code in there to open up something to read, and I'm not putting code in there to open up to write. This is just showing you what you can use exists for. What else should we do? We should actually make sure that it's a file, right? Because if it's a directory, well, I don't know. So if we're trying to save to a file, we might want to make sure, well, let's just find out if something is a directory or not. Let's go through our list of files again, but only print out directories. I better run it and then I better pause and make sure everybody's caught up. Right, what file should we open? I'm going to open output.txt. You saw I just copied and pasted. Ew, blew up. OS has no attribute exists. Is it file.exists? os.path, sorry. Got a few corrections need to make. Go back to your code and where it said exists, make it os.path.exists. Now we've got that in two places, so make sure you change it there and make sure you change it here, os.path.exists. Change both of them. That one and that one. All right, what file should we open? Output.txt. The file exists. Save to what file? Output.txt. That file already exists. Do you wish to overwrite it? Yeah. So you see what the utility of that is. All right, one more thing, and then I'm going to pause. So let's go through the directory listing again. For value in list files, colon. And let's check to see if it's a directory, which I just believe is isdir. Yep, is file versus isdir. So if os.path.isdir, parentheses, value, colon, we're going to print it out. Print parentheses, quote, directory, space, end quote, comma, value, in parentheses. What file should we open? Whatever. One. And these are the only two subdirectories in that directory. This function here, some functions of that sort, if you're running it on Linux or on the Mac, will show you dot and dot dot as two possible files. Dot just means the current directory. Dot dot means the directory above. Now I'm not sure if Python works that way. I'm not sure if listdir on Linux or the Mac also includes the dot and the dot dot, but if it does, those are also directories. What does dot mean? Well, if dot dot means one up, right, then a single dot means your current working directory, like this. So if I do dir dot dot, it's going to show me the directory up above it. But if I do dir space dot, it means this very directory. And you may wonder why you need some kind of, why did I specify that? Well, sometimes it's very useful to specify what directory you're going into. And if it's just the current working directory, you could use the dot. Okay, let me pause, make sure people are doing okay. So tacking on something, else colon, or, you know, we could do elif it's a file, but there's probably no other choice. Directory of file. So else colon print parentheses quote file. I'm going to just space all that over, even though it looks kind of dumb. End quote, comma value in parentheses. And there we go. Right. It listed all the files and it listed the directories.
When it said, go scroll up.
Whoops, sorry.
Go ahead and run it again. Right there. What file should and then what input do you put?
It depends what you want it to do. Because it's not actually opening any files then, right? It's just checking to see if it exists. What file should we open? If I give it a valid file, like output.txt, it's going to tell me, okay, opening it. Otherwise, it's going to say file not found. Then when it's asking to save, if I type in a file that exists, it's going to warn me. But what if I type in bad data here? You know, DSF file does not exist. Should we create it? And we could add some code that actually did something with that information. And then save to what file? I'm going to type in that directory name and see what it does about that. TEMP. All right, so we ought to modify our code a little bit more so that after they type it in and they want to save to that file, it checks to see if it's a directory. All right. Maybe we should change this so that it like loops until they pick a good file to save to, in which case we might use a while statement rather than an if statement. So I'm going to, I don't know whether I should copy it or comment. I'm going to copy these, comment those out. And what we're going to do is we're going to save to a file, but we're going to ask the user for the file name. If it exists, it's a problem. If it's a directory, then we're going to tell them that too. So again, fn equals input parentheses save to what file question mark end quote in parentheses. Now we need a variable to hold. I'm not sure if this is strictly true. We need a variable to contain the fact that it's okay to overwrite that file. So overwrite equals false. And then we're just going to loop until we get a good file name. We could actually put that as part of the loop here. So I'm going to go above that fn. These two things are going to have to probably be tabbed over. And I'm going to say while true. I don't think this is actually how I want to do it. I'm going to erase that. I shouldn't be winging it. All right. So while overwrite equals false. And this needs to be a little bit more complicated than that. I'm thinking about making it just a while true and using some break statements to bail out of it. Let's try that. Let's see if we don't get confused doing that. So while true, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to check to see if that file exists, right? So if os.path.isdir parentheses value equals false. So if it's not a directory and it's not a file, so I'm getting rid of that colon, and os.path.isFile parentheses, why am I calling it value? What should I be putting there? I need to fix that. What variable should I really be putting there? Value is fine for the for loop, but we don't have a value variable anymore. Well, what directory did we just fill in with the input statement? Yeah, fn.
Oh, yeah.
So there we go. So inside both of these functions need to be fn. So if the file is not a directory and it's not a file, then it doesn't exist, and it's all good. So we're just going to break. We may not even use that variable. We may wind up deleting it. So if it is a file, we need to ask them whether it's okay to overwrite it. So I back tabbed, and then if os.path.isFile parentheses fn in parentheses colon, we need to ask them, is it okay to overwrite? Yeah, we need to just get rid of that variable. So sorry about that. Nuke that. Overwrite equals input parentheses quote file exists. Erase and overwrite question mark y/n in space greater than end quote in parentheses. And if they say it's okay, then we're going to break. It's fine. If overwrite equals quote y end quote, it's great. They're willing to erase it. One more thing we're going to check. If it's a directory. If it's a directory, we're just going to tell them that's a directory. Please enter a file name. So I back tab to my other ifs. And notice the reason I'm not making them elifs is because if you have a break, you know that the next thing that's going to happen is that if it doesn't break. Kind of the same thing as an elif, right? There's no way to avoid getting here if it doesn't do that. Okay, so back tab here. If os.path.isdir parentheses fn in parentheses colon, we're going to tell them it's a directory. Print parentheses quote, that is a directory. Please pick a file name, end quote in parentheses. And if we get this far and we haven't broken out of it, we need to ask them for the file name again. So lined up with that if statement, we're going to ask them one more time. Fn is equal to input parentheses, the same statement we have up here. We could just copy and paste it and tab it over. Now we're good to go. Now we could open that file and we could save to it. So file equals open parentheses fn comma quote w end quote in parentheses. And let's write our file listing out. Remember, we still have that file listing in memory from earlier. So for value in list files colon file.write parentheses value plus quote \n, just because we have to hit enter after each one, \n end quote in parentheses. And then we're done writing to the file, so completely untabbed, file.close, parentheses in parentheses. That making sense? We're just doing a little bit of validation. We're preventing them from erasing a file. I better test it first, and then I'll wander around and see how y'all are doing. What file should we open? Well, let's open output.txt. All right, save to what file? Output.txt. And I just erased output.txt. Something about my logic didn't work. If I go and look at output.txt, I bet it's gone. I'm glad I didn't pick a more important file.
Is it still there?
It's there, and it's got all the new data in it. So my logic is wrong. I'm glad I didn't erase a more important file. Oh, this should have been equals false right there. I should rewrite this if statement for clarity. And I'm going to do that because I goofed that up. So I'm changing this first if statement to be correct because it's not right now. If not, parentheses, os.path.isdir, and I'm getting rid of that equals false, just nuke that part. And then also nuke that A and D and replace it with or. Or os.path.isFile, and then another close parentheses. So that one changed quite a bit. You're going to want to take great care in looking up here and making sure you got that right. But again, let me make sure it works because I botched it last time. Output.txt, output.txt, file exists, erase and overwrite it? No. Save to what file? Output.txt, wait, let's try saving it to that directory name, temp. That's a directory. Please pick a file name. It's starting to make me feel good. Output.txt. That file exists. Do you want to erase and overwrite it? Sure, why not? Now it did. I should add one more print statement saying that it actually worked, right? So print, parentheses, fn, comma, quote, or how about directory list space listing space saved to space in, or end quote, comma, fn. It's always a good idea just to make them feel good, to let them know what just happened. Output.txt, yes, it's okay. Directory listing saved output.txt. Okay, good. Okay, to make it allow both uppercase and lowercase, after we ask them whether the file exists and overwrite it, let's do if overwrite dot upper parentheses end parentheses, right? That way, even if they typed in a lowercase, it's okay.
I put mine after the input statement. Like, after you put file exists, erase, overwrite, yes or no.
Yeah.
After that parentheses, I put dot upper. So that no matter what.
Here, show me.
Yeah, put it here.
Yeah, you're right. You could do it there as well. Probably a better way to do it. I'll maybe modify my code that way. Maybe missing an equal sign. No equal sign, but let me get the here. All right, if it ever starts saying stupid stuff like can't decode, it's about time to start deleting and retyping it. I don't know what causes that kind of thing, but it means something got saved to it that it didn't know what it was. Not even your fault. I've seen it. I've had it happen to me. I don't know what kind of dark magic is happening. File, whatever, we're going to save to a file. Let's just save to something.txt. It's going to work. File about right because that's what that one's called. All right, and then try it a couple of different times. Nope, that one's fine because that's what it's called, right?
Oh,
Yeah. So we all good? Anybody need any more typing? Alrighty. Sorry, gang, I should have paused it. Or instead of doing a comparison like that, I could just add the dot upper way back here. Right, dot upper to convert the input into an uppercase letter, and then I wouldn't need to do it there. Works in either place. The advantage of doing it here is that you don't have to keep checking over and over. Or you could convert it to uppercase right here. Overwrite equals overwrite dot upper. Alrighty, we're about done with this chapter. One thing that we haven't done that I don't recall, maybe we did, is the split function. What split does is it turns a list from a string, or it turns a string into a list, like this. And I'm just going to go and put this up at the very top because I'm tired of answering questions every time I run it. So what if I do something like this? You know, colors equals quote, red comma, green comma, blue. And then I want to turn that into a list so that I can do array type stuff with it. I could do colors equals colors dot split, parentheses, and I'm going to specify what character is the so-called delimiter. The delimiter is the thing that appears between each word. My delimiter is a comma, so I'm going to put a comma there, in quote. Now I'm going to print the colors out just like this, print colors, to prove that it worked. And then I'm going to add an input statement that says hit enter to continue. Yeah, and so you see now it's a list, right? We could actually do stuff with it. We could use a for loop to step through it. So if you read in data from a file and it's all separated by commas, then if you call dot split on it, then you can turn it into a list and you can add those things together. So I'm not going to do it today, but we could do this. I could make a file called input.txt, and it had numbers that were supposed to be added. And by using dot split, that could be turned into a list. We'd have to convert it to integers or floats or something like that, and then we could add them all up. Call a sum function on it to add them all up. You know. And we could do that over and over, right? We might create a student file that where the first piece of text in it is the student's name, and then the rest of the numbers are their test scores. We'll probably do that the day after the exam, week from today. Like that. And so dot split is really useful for reading stuff in from a file. Does it have to be commas? No. If we put spaces in our data, like this, go away. No, I don't want to save you. This will be the last thing we cover. If we do something like this, nums equals 1 space, 2 space, 34 space, whatever. Just type in some numbers separated by spaces. And then nums equals nums dot split, parentheses, quote, space, quote, in parentheses, and then print out the nums, print parentheses nums. We're going to see that that string has been converted into a list. And we could add them up or whatever. We can't quite add them up yet. Oh, anyways, there it is. Right. We can't quite add them up because they're strings and we would need to turn them into integers. But that's not too hard to do. I'm going to move that hit enter to continue business to delete that and put it right above import OS. And I'm going to convert those nums into a string using something that's a little bit beyond where we are right now, but it's called list comprehension. It's an entire loop in one statement. So nums equals open square brace. Oh gosh, I don't want to get this wrong. int or float parentheses, value in parentheses, for value in nums. Close curly brace. Excuse me, close square brace. Let me just make sure that worked. And it did. Right, now it's a list of numbers that we could add up. So total equals sum parentheses nums. Something like that, right? We took some data, we split it up, we separated it all by the spaces, we turned it into a list, And then we turn that list into a list of numbers using so-called list comprehension. A list comprehension is when you create a list based on another list, all in one line. It's got a for loop there. It just replaces like a 3 or 4 line for loop. So this is list comprehension. And that is about enough. We definitely need to stop because we needed to get out of here. Sorry, gang, I need to actually stop us from typing. And if you don't have it typed in, that's okay, but we got to get to the next part. Wanted to do a little bit of review. Best reviews to do the basic reviews, right? Go to MindTap, take the basic reviews.
The quizzes.
Yeah, the quizzes.
Go back for a second.
No, I'm sorry, but I need to switch over to this and I'll bring it back up when we're done. But some people need to leave exactly on the dot, and so if I don't do this stuff, they won't be able to leave. I'll bring it up at the end. There should be a Lecture N Dropbox. And the network just chose right now to slow way down so I can't open the quiz preview. I'm so pleased. Oh, you gotta be kidding me. Success. All right. So one thing I'm going to want you to be able to do is if you see something like this, formula for volume of a cylinder. If I give you this fancy looking thing, I want you to be able to turn it into Python, right? So, you know, you're going to put asterisks between everything, and you're going to use star star between the R and the 2, and you'd be pretty much done, right? You know, V is equal to, you know, and I don't care whether you just put the word pi or 3.14159 or whatever. Got to know how to do that. Please know how to do math. What do I mean by that? If I have x is equal to 3, y is equal to 5, then what is x plus y? You know what that is. X minus y. You know what that is. X to the power of y. Well, I don't know what 3 to the power of 5 is, so I'm not going to ask you that question, but you know, if you had to, you figured that out. You know, and then y modulus x. So what is 5 modulus 3? That means 3 goes into 5 one time with a remainder of?
I'm sorry?
2. Yep, yep. And so on. So if you have something like this, come on, or you have this, or you have this, which is the float, which is the string, and which is the int?
The integer is the middle.
That's the int. That's a
float
float.
is the bottom, and the string is in quote.
Yep, that's the string. Exactly. If you have this, using the ABS function, absolute value, if you have x is equal to -7, and then you have y is equal to ABS 7, excuse me, y equals ABS x, what is that? Well, what does absolute value mean? It means just drop the minus sign.
Mm-hmm.
So x at that point is 7. Yeah. If you're going to print out 2 floating point values, excuse me, a float to 2 decimal places, like you want 7.77 rather than 7.77, right? Are you going to use %2f? Are you going to use %.2f? Which one of those going to print to 2 decimal places? Only one of these works.
%.2f?
Yep, %.2f prints to 2 decimal places. What if we needed to print out 2 different numbers? Like if you had this, print %.2f, %.2f, and then I have 2 variables, a and b. How do I format those? What's the rest of the statement going to be in order to put 2 values in those placeholders if I want to put a and b? Is this right? And no, it's not. Do I put a, comma, b? It worked for other languages, but not Python. How do I do it in this language? I put a % sign there, and then put those there. That lets a and b fill in those 2 placeholders. I'm assuming you know how to use if and else. Like if x is equal to 3, and then I do, you know, if x equals 3, then y is equal to 5, else, you know, y is equal to 6, print out y, and then I ask you what it's going to print out. Well, obviously, if x is equal to 3, that would be a syntax error, but I'm not going to try to trip you up like that.
You said print out y, so it'd just be 5, right?
Well, it's not going to equal 5. Why? Because what is x? X is 3. And so if x is equal to 3, what does y become? I forgot to give y a starting value, but we give it one down here. So is x equal to 3? True, false?
That is true.
Oh, and you said I was going to print 5, and you're correct. You're correct. Why did I say no? See, I spaced. I would have gotten that question wrong. You would have gotten it right. How do you break out of a loop early? If you have a while true or something like that, and you want to exit the loop early, what's the key word that gets you out of the loop?
Oh, break.
Yep, good old break. Multi-line comments versus regular comments. That's a single line comment. That's a multi-line comment.
Single line is red, multiple line is green. That's probably not going to be on.
Single line comment is a hash. Multi-line comment is a triple quote.
Or 3 single.
Or 3 apostrophes. Yep. If you're going to compare 2 variables, is this a good way of comparing 2 variables or a bad way? Is that a syntax error or a good thing right there?
That's bad.
That's bad. This would be correct.
Yep.
Yep. One of those is good, one of those is
Single
bad.
equal sign means you setting a value to something.
Exactly. Know the definition of and or. And means both sides have to be true. Or means only one. So if x is equal to 3 and y is equal to 4 or 5, then this is only true when x and y precisely equal those values. But if you change that to an or, then it's true. Right, only one side has to be true. Even if y isn't 5, if x is equal to 3, then it'll work. If you need to print, if you have something like this, a equals 1, 2, b equals 3, 4, and you print a comma b, it's going to print out 1, 2, space 3, 4. There's really no way around it. What if we didn't want the space? Is there another way to print that would get rid of the space? What does the plus sign do when you have strings?
Mash them together?
Yep, it's called concatenation. So if you do a plus b, it would print it out
As a string?
1, 2, 3, 4, like that. Yeah, if you use plus on numbers, it does math, right? But if you do plus on strings, then it just concatenates them, mash them together. We've done try and except a couple of times. If you have this code, try x is equal to int y, except colon print error, right? These are the keywords to remember. Remember, try, and except. Because I may give you some code that looks like this, right? Question mark, question mark, question mark, question mark, question mark, question mark, and ask you what to do to add the error handling to it. To add the error handling to it, the first one is try, and the second one is accept.
And basically, it's just saying, try the following function.
Yep, try that function. And if it works, great.
If it doesn't.
But if it doesn't, then do this
print
thing.
error.
Yep. Just like if you did this, if error. I mean, that wouldn't work, right? But that's what the accept means, is if there's an error, do that. But if there's not, then don't. While loops. X is equal to 1. While x is less than or equal to 5. Print Bob. X plus plus, or x plus equals 1. How many times is Bob going to be printed out? Now, you don't have to type the code in and run it to figure that out. You can just count it on your fingers. It's going to print it when x is equal to 1. Then it's going to print it while x is equal to 2. So I've got 2 on my fingers. And then when x is 3 and when it's 4.
right?
Yeah, it's going to print it exactly 5. But if I did that, how many times is it going to print it?
4.
4, right. Exactly. Know how to write a for x in range statement. And if you need to bail, just watch the video and jump ahead to 58 minutes and you'll be right where we are for x in range. Right? You want to start at 10, you want to go to 20, you'd make that what? I want to go to 20, do I put 20 there or 21?
21.
Yep. And if I want to jump by 2s, I do that.
Start, and then 1 after the end, and then the increment.
Yep, that's the starting point. This is 1 past the end, and that's the increment. I said that because the mic wouldn't hear you. Some of these are just flat out quiz questions. I'm not going to go over every quiz question. Is it true that idle is included when you install Python? When you install?
I believe so.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. What do you use idle for? Can you edit Python with it? Yeah.
Yes.
Can you run programs with it? Yeah. Can you manage the operating system with it? That sounds pretty stupid. No. Can you draw flowcharts with it? Nah.
No.
Will it display syntax errors? Will it try to catch them?
Yes.
It tries. Yeah. And does it have a shell that you can enter commands into?
Yes.
Yep. So if those are all true-false questions, the vast majority of them would have been true. Precedence. What has higher precedence, multiplication or addition?
Multiplication.
Yep. And so if you had to do them all in order, parentheses, exponent,
Ugh.
multiplication, division.
I hate this question.
Yeah, I know. But it's PEMDAS. Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. If you can remember that, you can remember these.
PEMDAS, got it.
Yep. Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. I didn't make that up. It's silly, but it works. If you're going to import from the math library, you can do something like this. Import math, or if you have a specific function you want, say that there was a function called XYZ, you could do from math import XYZ. Either one of those works.
That's a quiz.
Yeah. If you do a round, but you specify a number of places, you can do that, right? If you do x is equal to round 1.23, that's equal to 1. But if you x is equal to round 1.23, comma 1, it leaves a decimal place. Or excuse me, 1.2, right? X is equal to round, and you can actually even give it negative numbers, and it starts rounding, you know, past the decimal point. But and if you round that number to 2 decimal places, well, it's just its original value. Just remember that you can specify the number of places when you round it, and if you don't, that's all you get. It's just a whole number. That's pretty close to it. There's going to be a couple of coding questions that aren't going to be like more than 2 or 3 lines long. Write a loop that'll print from 1 to 20. Write something that'll ask for your age and convert it into a float. That kind of thing.
Cool. I come to this class to feel good after crypto.
After Ken's class. All right. So we're done.
Yeah, I would say take roll, but we're only 2 here.
Yep. You're right about that.
So